Honestly, it was tough. I think I was just refusing to face the truth. Embracing the fact that you actually carry that kind of weight or sway is a struggle, mainly because I've just been me this entire time. Her journey already had me hooked, but after our conversation, my admiration skyrocketed. I'm a massive supporter now. I truly cannot praise her contributions to tennis enough. She is an absolute blessing to the game. That talk was a masterclass in being grounded. Here I am at 43, a lifelong veteran of this sport, thinking there is zero chance I could have been that practical or centered. He spent 30 minutes face-to-face with her. Meanwhile, the critics who dismissed her success as luck or a passing fad, expecting her to vanish once things settled, woke up to a former top-ranked pro calling himself her biggest fan after just a 30-minute chat. Only 30 minutes. Once the session wrapped and the gear was powered down, Andy Roddick sat there with Jon Wertheim just trying to wrap his head around the whole experience. Staying that level-headed while caught in a massive fame whirlwind seemed impossible to him. He described the whole encounter as a deep lesson in self-perception. He didn't just call it a solid interview or label her a rising star. He called it an education in self-knowledge. A 20-year-old managed to school a 43-year-old legend, a man who hit the very top of the rankings, played for Wimbledon titles, and now makes a living decoding athletes' psyches on air. Following his meeting with Alex Eala, Andy Roddick left with the distinct feeling that he was the one who had just been tutored. Then he dropped the four-word bombshell that stunned the tennis community. My respect grew even more after we talked. Roddick is officially a die-hard supporter of a 20-year-old ranked 29th with no major titles. Yet, someone the tour's leadership is desperately trying to manage without actually grasping her true magnitude. That kind of authenticity is priceless. It can't be faked. No amount of branding or PR could ever script a legend like Roddick praising your character on the nation's premier tennis show. You gain that respect simply by staying true to yourself at every turn. I'm currently inhabiting my own fantasy. This was always the goal turning pro, challenging the elites on iconic courts and seeing those stands packed with people. Let's break down the details because there is much more to this narrative than what the news clips are showing. To start, let's look at who Andy Roddick is and why his perspective holds such massive credibility. We aren't talking about some pundit who only views the game from the bleachers. He isn't just a talker who critiques others for a paycheck. Roddick actually reached the very top of the world rankings. He claimed the 2003 U.S. Open crown, remaining the final American male to win a major, and he fought for 4 Wimbledon trophies. Having spent his career clashing with Federer during tennis's golden era, he has an insider's view of true greatness. He understands how stress impacts a competitor and can spot who controls the fame versus who gets swallowed by it. Plus, his podcast isn't just some casual chatter. The show with Alex Eala touched on her Miami success, her status as a Philippine icon, training with her granddad, moving to Spain at 13, meeting Nadal, her massive following, and her court mindset. It was 30 minutes of straight talk. Afterward, when Roddick and Wertheim chatted privately, those 15 minutes of commentary went absolutely viral, breaking show records. The reason is that Roddick's feedback was completely unexpected, coming from a legend who hadn't even met Eala until that day. He saw it as a masterclass in maturity. At 43, with decades in the sport, he admitted he couldn't imagine being that logical or composed himself, particularly while standing right in the middle of a fame-induced hurricane. Consider the burden of being a national pioneer. It's a lot to carry even for a 43-year-old former world champion. At 43, after 2 decades in the pro circuit playing at the absolute peak of the sport, having been on the receiving end of thousands of press questions, and after hosting hundreds of shows himself, he's confessing, "I wouldn't have managed that, not at 20. Not under that pressure, and certainly not with that much weight on my shoulders." He was intentional with his praise, highlighting her practicality and her sharp self-perception. Rational, insightful. Even at 43, with all his life lessons and pro matches behind him, and every bit of personal growth he's found since retiring from the court, he's acknowledging that Eala's 20-year-old self has a level of maturity he simply didn't possess at that age. That admission is far more powerful than any other praise she could receive. It's not about stats or full arenas. It's about a legendary athlete admitting, "I didn't have my head on straight like she does. Back when I was 20 and climbing the ranks, I lacked that focus. I didn't have her level of inner strength." Roddick's interest started earlier. After her January loss in Melbourne, he was already tracking her and telling his listeners what the tour officials should have noticed a long time ago. On his show after the Australian Open, he pointed out that her media numbers dwarf those of the biggest stars because of her huge Philippine fanbase. The impact is wild. And it's a phenomenon that every tournament director is going to have to acknowledge. by calling it mind-blowing and a wake-up call for the industry. He was doing more than just praising her. He was essentially sending a flare out to every event organizer on the professional tour. Take note when a former world #1 and sports business expert issues a warning this serious. This isn't something that can wait. It's impossible to ignore at this very moment. Eala's pre-tournament media session at the Australian Open racked up 178,000 views, outperforming every other athlete there. That list includes Carlos Alcaraz, Jannik Sinner, and Coco Gauff, three of the biggest, most household names in the game combined. None of them could touch the digital footprint of a 20-year-old from the Philippines who didn't even make it past round one. Having followed the data all year, Roddick finally sat down with her in Miami and walked away completely blindsided by what he found. He left that room as a massive supporter. Now let's dig into what she actually shared during that conversation. Roddick's stunned reaction is perfectly clear once you hear how she views her evolution between 2025 and 2026. Now guys, my career just took off like a rocket, and I'm honestly just so incredibly grateful for it all. Her core identity hasn't shifted an inch. She isn't claiming to be some brand new, transformed version of herself. It is not about becoming more refined or professional. Her character roots and outlook remain exactly as they were before. Only her win-loss record changed. She treats her success as a blessing, not something the world owes her. She sees it as a gift, even though she has been grinding since 4:45 in the morning since she was 12. The fans were starting to show up, like really show up in massive numbers. People were spending money on tickets and carving out time to watch, and it was just overwhelming. Honestly, I think I was blocking it out because accepting that I had become a literal sensation felt impossible. The tour's biggest headline, who draws more eyes than Djokovic and bigger crowds than Alcaraz, could not believe her own hype was real. This is not some manufactured humbleness or a public relations stunt cooked up for the cameras and reporters. You are looking at someone trying to wrap their head around a level of fame that tennis has never actually seen before. Then she dropped the line that killed the noise in the studio. I spent 10 years practicing on a court shared with basketball hoops. From a concrete playground to Wimbledon Center Court, the ultimate dream for the most successful Filipino player to ever pick up a racket. The girl who outdraws Alcaraz and forces tournament directors into crisis mode just turned Andy Roddick into her biggest advocate. She literally spent the first 10 years of her career honing her craft on a court that was half basketball. Forget the country club vibes and fancy headbands. This is a gritty underdog story about a girl whose dream is to actually win Wimbledon, not just attend. That leap from a Philippine basketball court to the sport's biggest stage tells her entire life story in one breath. The second Roddick heard that detail, everything finally made sense to him. It went deeper than just numbers or his decades of experience. It hit on a purely human level. He admitted to being intrigued from afar, but meeting her face-to-face turned him into a die-hard supporter. That is the standard experience for anyone who crosses paths with Alex Eala in 2026. You see the clickbait wildcard upset Swiatek, or Filipino star fills arena, and you are naturally curious. When you see her matching Alcaraz's attendance, you figure you have got the whole situation figured out. But then you hear about the court she shared with ballers, her grandpa prepping the surface, and that ignored message she sent to Rafa Nadal. You hear about her 4 a.m. press conferences and 3-hour marathons, all fueled by a perfect mix of self-belief and total modesty. She believes that if she can nail the timing between being bold and being thankful, she has found the winning formula. She is a beast on this court, but stays grounded off it, managing to be fierce and grateful at the exact same time. At 43, Roddick recognized a masterclass in self-awareness, knowing most stars cannot balance confidence, humility, and gratitude. Usually they just pick two. Yet here is Eala, 20 years old and hitting all three marks while navigating a level of fame we have not seen since Serena Williams. When the conversation turned to how the organization is handling her, Roddick did not pull any punches. He insisted that tournaments are obligated to respect her massive following because the numbers are simply off the charts. This was not just some friendly advice. It was a veteran saying that ignoring her is no longer an option. Looking at the 178,000 views and the midnight crowds in Miami, he is saying the industry has to adapt immediately. This is not some passing fad. It is the new foundation of the sport, which makes the current situation even more ironic. The tour already saw the 48% ticket jump, and the massive crowds even prompting apologies from legends like James Blake about her impact. Even so, the tournament schedules are stuck in the past, often tucking her away on side courts that cannot hold her fans. She is still being handed late-night time slots that do not match the massive demand to see her play. While the officials move at a snail's pace, her popularity is moving like a freight train, and Roddick just jumped on board. Listen up, because this is truly incredible. I was interested before, but now I am a total convert. When will the women's tour finally wake up? At what point does the calendar catch up to this star? When does the league transition from chasing Alex Eala to building around her? Mike, the producer, nailed the vibe as we rapped, asking if she was actually 47. That line worked because the underlying reality is just so obvious. This 20-year-old moves with the grace of a veteran who has spent a lifetime navigating the professional athletic world. She has bridged the divide between her true self and public perception while mastering the secret formula for success. That elusive blend of self-assurance and humility, something most pros never discover, was forged on a cramped outdoor court back in the Philippines. That spirit traveled to Nadal's academy and sustained her throughout her grind on the developmental tours. She showed that same poise in Miami while entering as a wild card ranked 140th. She ground out every single point and every bracket until her performance metrics became undeniable, leading Andy Roddick to arrange this talk where a former world number one sat there feeling like he was being schooled. My interest was piqued before we even sat down. Now that we have chatted, I am an even bigger supporter. Massive. All the internet trolls showed up hoping to spin a different tale. Instead, they encountered Roddick and a profound clinic on internal perspective. A legendary figure just validated that the rise of Alexandra Eala is far more than just a passing headline or a lucky streak. This is a full-blown revolution that is barely starting. Take note, because even the elite champions are studying her game now. If that Roddick segment gave you goosebumps, definitely like and subscribe, because the clay season begins next month and a kid who grew up on a concrete court is storming the French Open while the world remains unprepared.